I think overall our society just sucks at grief, right? We suck at death and dying, and we just need to talk about it more.
Hello, beautiful people, trailblazers, leaders, and light keepers. It's Michele Phillips with this week's episode of Write Your Outcome. Today, I have with me Kelly Daugherty, and this topic is one of my favorite topics. I always love people that combine science and metaphysics. So welcome to the Write Your Outcome studio, Kelly.
Thank you, Michele. I'm so excited to be here.
I am very excited to have this conversation. I am going to read a little bit about Kelly to give her proper credit where credit is due, and then we're going to launch into the conversation. Kelly Daugherty is an expert in grief counseling and the founder and owner of the Center for Informed Grief, located in Malta, New York. Kelly's passion for helping individuals navigate their grief journey stemmed from her own experience as a grieving teenager when her mom died from breast cancer. Kelly found comfort in a hospice grief support group, which led her to volunteer with the Hospice Children's Bereavement Program and paved the way for her career in grief and loss. Kelly finds meaning in grief every day by helping individuals navigate their grief and by helping teachers and counselors be more grief informed. Kelly is the author of multiple books. The one I have here written is The Grief Experience, Tools for Acceptance, which is the biggest thing, right? Acceptance, resiliency, and connection. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Michele.
Thank you for being here. I mean, all of us have had grief, have had loss. And, you know, it's bringing up something. I was listening to a fiction book yesterday, and in the book, I remember the author said, or the character, you know, everyone says people are afraid of being alone, but we're afraid of being abandoned. You could choose to be alone, but when someone leaves you before you want them to leave you, you know, where do you start? How, you know, let's talk about, you know, where do you even start with helping people accept, be resilient, and connect?
Yeah, so I think resilient, I love Lucy Hone. She wrote Resilient Grieving, and what she did the forward for the Grief Experience book. And the way she describes resilient grieving is a healthy adaptation to loss. And I think that's the way we need to look at grief and resilience. You know, it's not about bouncing back to where we were before, because we can't. Grief changes us, and our lives are forever changed because of this huge loss that we've experienced and not having this person in our life anymore. So resilience with grief is really just, how can we adapt this? How can we integrate this into our life? It's always going to be there. It may look different. You know, we're going to grow bigger than our grief, but our grief is always still going to be there. I mean, I'm 31 years out from my mom's death, and I'm still grieving her. Yeah. Not obviously like it was maybe in the beginning, but there's still times where it comes up and it hits me. And that's, you know, pretty normal.
Thank you for this clarification. I think the words you used were, correct me, a healthy adaptation to grief. And I really that resonates with me. So, Kelly and I talked a little bit before we got on, and, you know, her dad is passed away a year this November, and my dad will be 2 years this November. And we had the bond. My sister used to say to me, you and Dad have this weird bond. Like, I just knew when he was sad. I knew when he was happy. Like, we were just codependent beyond, like, that's a whole other episode. But we just felt each other so deeply. And for years, this might sound, I don't know what it sounds, because it really helped me. I prepared. I read so many books on not just grieving, but what happens to you, the soul when it leaves the body, so that it helped me be what you said, a healthy adaptation to grief. So start us off on your journey. I'm going to bring you back a little bit. Your mom passes away. You were young. It said you were a child. I don't know how old you were. Teenager.
14. Yeah.
14. I don't know if it was unexpected or expected, but how did this lead you to, you know, becoming dedicated to this, you know, helping others?
My mom died from breast cancer. She had been sick for about 2.5 years. She did have a period of remission, but when it came back awful and was everywhere in her body, I think, except for the liver, which was kind of interesting. But everywhere else, it was in her brain. And so although my dad, I watched a video recently of me as a teenager on a TV show with my social worker, and and even hearing this as an adult, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. Like my dad knew my mom wasn't going to live from the time of her diagnosis. You know, they were told that this is a really aggressive form of cancer. She's not going to survive, but he didn't tell us that.
Right.
And so for 2.5 years, I think I just like, oh, she's just going to get better. Right. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table and my dad sitting us down and saying, the doctor says she has 7 days to live.
Wow.
And I didn't want to believe this, you know, obviously. And I remember going to the hospital and like shoving food in her mouth and being like, well, if she just eats, she's going to be okay. She's going to get better. She's going to be okay. And obviously that wasn't the case. And she lived 8 days, not 7. And so like, even after that, I was like, oh, see, she's going to make it. And I remember the day my sisters and I went to see her because it was visiting hours back then, you know, in 1994, and her hands and her feet were blue. Now, obviously now I know what was happening, but at the time we asked the nurse, like, why is my mom's hands blue? And they're like, oh, we don't know. We'll have to have the doctor call you. It was like they saw 3 young girls and they didn't want to tell us what was actually happening. And we got the call about 2 hours later. The hospital left a message on their answering machine at home and said that my mom had expired. And my immediate reaction was, she's not a piece of cheese.
Right.
You know, and so it was obviously extremely rough. I remember being in the hospital and like having like seen her after she died and like the nurses like telling me I had to be quiet because I was being too loud.
So was there help for you back then, or was there no resources? I mean, you said you joined
I'm really lucky. I mean, despite what my dad was going through and everything, he got us into family counseling, him and I. And he got me into this hospice grief group. And I always share this story because I think it's hysterical. But I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. I was boy crazy. I was 15 years old at this point. And I, you know, my dad told me there'd be boys at the grief group. So that is the reason I went.
Let's be honest. We all, you know, been there, done that.
He knew what he needed to like get me to go. And that group changed my life. So I'm very fortunate that I had that experience. You know, I got to walk into that room and I finally felt that I wasn't alone. And finally were able to understand that there were other kids out there like me. Now, everyone in this group's dad had died, and which is really interesting because I find this even at the grief groups that I volunteer at, it's majority of the kids that I work with there, it's their dads that have died. So there was still even a is it because women live longer, or I don't know. I don't know. It's so fascinating to me that maybe what really it is that women are more open to getting their kids help. It could be partly that, right?
That's really, that really resonates.
I never even thought about that until I just said that. I'm like, oh, that probably is part of it.
We're more intuitive. We're more, we have both sides of our brains working all the time versus the logical side only.
So the social worker I met, Rini, she was amazing. And she's the reason I'm talking to you today. If it hadn't been for her, she recognized that I wanted to do more. I went to another group after that one. Okay. Teen groups are hard to get off the ground. And so that one was kind of a bit of a flop. And there was a boy in that one though.
I love the things we remember. I hear my phone going off someplace. I don't even know where it is. Okay, keep talking. I don't know.
And so and then she asked me to start volunteering with the children's program and just being around those kiddos and being able to support them. And, she says still to this day, she's like, there were some kids that wouldn't even come into the room without you there. You made such a difference. And I volunteered at my first children's grief camp when I was 17. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And
so this is the whole trajectory. You've not had any other career since 14.
I've done social work since I was, my entire career. I mean, I've done different things. I worked in trauma for a little bit, but I worked in some mental health agencies to get my licensure hours and things like that. But even anywhere I worked, I always did grief groups, everywhere. I've always found a way to incorporate grief into it. I worked in a couple different hospices.
I love what you're saying. And you said something earlier I want to go back to. What did you say? Oh, why are her hands turning blue? Oh, we don't know. Why don't we don't talk about it? We, two things I've read years ago. I remember, Eckhart Tolle writes about, how in India, like death is everywhere. Like they don't hide it. It's there. He goes, in America, he said, try to see a dead body. You can't. We lock them away.
No.
Like we shouldn't see them. And the other piece was, I think it was Arianna Huffington's book. I think she created some kind of death board game. Like it's not a death board game. It's kind of like a game where you talk about what the wishes are when you die. So how do we help people start talking about this?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of trainings and presentations. That's my goal. I'm so grateful for the grief experience book is a collaborative grief book. So there's 25 of us that all wrote it together, and each chapter is a different story of grief. So all different kinds, not just death. And then it has tools to help the reader. And so 11 out of the 25 are all local to my area in upstate New York. So we do a lot of events together. I just was at a YWCA event a couple of weeks ago with one of the other authors who's a funeral director. And so we're trying to get out there to talk about this. She does a lot of pre-planning stuff. And I remember when I met her, she's like not the traditional funeral director either. Like,
which I love already.
Yeah, she's young and fun. And I show up at her funeral home. She's got bright teal pants on. And I'm like, you're not like the stuffy funeral director that we have this idea of. Every time I see her, she has a different hair color. I love it. But I asked her, I said, my dad lives in Florida. Like he's getting older. He was probably like 87 at this time. I'm like, I know he's in good shape. Like there was really nothing wrong with him. I was like, but like, what should we do? Like, he wants to be buried on Long Island with my mom, but he lives in Florida. And so she like walked me through that. I went and visited my dad like the next month. We called the funeral home and we pre-planned his whole funeral together. And when he died in a hospice house, and they said, what's the funeral home? And I said, here it is. It's the one on Long Island. They coordinated with a funeral home in Florida, did it all. And they called me back. The funeral home called me like a couple hours later and said, we have one question for you since you've already pre-planned everything. Do you want your dad clean shaven? And I was like, if that's the only question I have to answer right now, like that's amazing. And so like, I love talking about pre-planning because there is right when you walk into a funeral home, when somebody dies, you have 130 questions you have to answer.
Is that how many? Oh, and you're just so overwhelmed and grief ridden.
Exactly. And so, these are the things we should be talking about, the 5 wishes. We should be coming up with what we want. We should be pre-planning, even prepaying, because every year it goes up about 7% increase.
What are the 5 wishes? You said something that piqued my interest.
Yeah. So the 5 wishes is a document that really is about what do you want for the end of life care? Do you want, do you want to be put on a ventilator? Do you not? Do you want to be withheld food? All of these things. So your wishes can be honored. And so then also your family doesn't have to make those decisions. Yeah. So I think overall our society just sucks at grief, right? We suck at death and dying, and we just need to talk about it more. The more we talk about it, maybe we can become like India,
well, books have helped me so much. I can't even which book should I talk about first, but they really have opened me up. When my dad was dying in the hospital, I was reading The In-Between by Haley somebody. She's a hospice nurse, and she wrote about what happens to the bodies in the in-between, and all these books have brought me comfort, Journey of Souls. And
I love that. That was life-changing for me.
Right. And I just picture these soul groups, and now I figure out who my soul group is. So people listening that don't know these books, look them up. But in Journey of Souls, it talks about how our souls go and come back, and we come back in soul groups. And it's about what our souls are doing between lives. And I was brought up Catholic, so we didn't talk about reincarnation. But the more I read about these books, the more I believe that this is the way it goes. And they really have brought so much comfort to me. So I do encourage people to get Kelly's book, educate yourself, talk about it. The priest, when my uncle died, he died right before my dad. He got on the altar, and the first words out of his mouth were, God knows what he's doing. And those words have just rung in my ears because, and I don't know if you're a believer, not believer, people listening, but God, universe, whatever. It's like, you have to know that there's something bigger out there, that it's not for us to control. And what you said, I hear so many people say, Kelly, I was trying to feed her, and we try to take control of things that we don't have control over. So how do we get to that acceptance part? What are some tips or things you could help us when someone is dying?
Well, I think acceptance is a big word, and I think it's layered, and I don't necessarily think it's an end point. I think it's ongoing, especially when the person has died, right? There's going to be things I even found with when my dad died last year, like re-grieving my mom in a lot of ways, because now I feel like a bit of an orphan. You use the word abandoned, but like I feel like a bit of an orphan. Like I don't have anyone to fall back on. Obviously I have other people.
No, believe me, I thought about it because my mom, same thing.
It's just different. It's your parents. And so acceptance, I think, is ongoing, right? We have to, like, when we are in a new phase of life or a new thing, we have to accept that they're not going to be here for this. We have to accept the reality that they're gone, but that's not a one-time thing. It's over and over again. And as far as like when somebody's dying and accepting it, I don't, that's a hard one, Michele, because I worked for hospice. I know what happens when somebody dies. Yet when it was happening to me with my dad, I didn't want to believe it. Yeah. We celebrated his 90th birthday in April of 24. He was doing great. I mean, you would never known he was 90. I could show you a picture and you'd be like, he wasn't 90. I'm like, yeah, he was. And then, in July, he went in for some constipation issues and found out he had metastatic prostate cancer, which was just the beginning of the end, and multiple surgeries and sundowning began, and all of his charts say he had dementia. My father did not have dementia. He was not and so it was just one thing after another. And I remember my sister and I were moving him into an assisted living because we realized that this is what we needed to do for him. And we were moving him in during the week of a hurricane. So we couldn't stay in his condo because his condo was right on the water and got evacuated. So we had me and my sister had to stay in this assisted living room, like probably as big as my office right now, with my dad for a week. It was not fun. But he would wake up in the middle of the night calling out for his sisters that have he was the last one. He was the youngest of 13, but all of his siblings had died. And he'd be calling out to them. And in the morning, I'd be like, Anne, like, Dad's calling out, like, this is not good. Like, we know what this means, And actually I have it sitting right here, but it's called Gone From My Sight. And it's called the Blue Book in the hospice world. Like, that's what you give people. And I had do I need to read the Blue Book? Well, then when we finally decided that, like, he had another fall, another pneumonia, he was back in the hospital. I was flying down. I was like, I'm going to sit on the plane. Why I would do this and read Gone From My Sight again to remind myself.
Oh my God, were you bawling?
Yeah, I was like, and every plane ride I took for like those 4 months, I was a mess on. And nobody asked me how I was doing, of course. But,
what's wrong with our society? That's a whole other topic also.
Exactly. But I sat there reading this book and I'm like, this has been going on for months. And I didn't want to believe it. Like, I was like, I know this stuff. And yet I didn't want to believe it for my dad.
Yeah. And that's
because we're not ready.
Part. We're never ready. And that's, and that's where my spiritual learnings have come in. And I've collected so many different ones over the years, but they comfort me in knowing that, I think it was Seth who said, the most shocked person at a funeral is the dead person, because his soul is looking down. Like, the soul is still alive. The soul is still here. And he's like, oh my gosh, there I am. And it just makes me laugh, and it brings me comfort to know that even though, like you said, gone, what was the title of the book again?
Gone From My Sight.
Gone from my sight, but not gone from my heart. Hello, I am interrupting this podcast to give a plug for my brand new book, Energize Your Happiness. I am so proud of this book. And I can't wait for you to read it or listen to it, because it will be on audio as well. And I just want you to know you don't have to push so hard. You don't have to be so stressed. You have all this beautiful energy inside you. And when you learn to manage the energy, when you learn to focus your energy, everything starts to fall into place. So energize your happiness, tap into your personal energy, and shape your destiny comes directly from my heart to your heart. It's available on lulu.com. It's available on Amazon.com. And if you'd like a personally signed copy, go to energizeyourhappiness.com and I will personally sign and autograph a copy and ship it out to you. So Energize Your Happiness is available right now. It makes a great gift for the holidays. And if you're hearing this after the holidays, it makes a great gift for Valentine's Day. New Year's, you name it, it makes a great gift. Make it a great day. Back to the podcast. Before we got on the call, you told me, I'm going to read it because I wrote it down. Now I can't read what I wrote. Induced after death communication.
Yep.
So let's talk, because to me, we could, go through the stages of grief and go through the clinical
Michele.
stuff. But to me, the spiritual things are the ones that comfort me and give me relief.
Yes.
So let's talk about induced, or you want to talk about the grief? The stages of grief.
I want to talk about that for a minute, Michele, because that is like my hot topic button. And I can't just sit on a podcast and not interrupt you with that one because the stages are bullshit. Sorry, excuse my language.
That's how I felt. I just wanted to pass over them and go to other stuff because I'm like, it's BS. Bullshit. Let's say bullshit. Yeah.
It was developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969 for people who were actively dying. Yeah. And even as early as 1972, there's articles out there that talk about saying that the stages don't exist. Yet we use them for grief and loss. We're still using them. There's still authors out there promoting them. They have never been proven. They are not accurate. They make us think that grief is linear and predictable and that we're going to go through. Not everybody that's grieving has depression. And there isn't an ending with acceptance. That's not what grief, there isn't an ending. So one of my biggest passions is to get that out in the world, to stop talking about this. We shouldn't be teaching it in high school health classes. We shouldn't be teaching it to doctors. Even my gastro last year, he sat there in his office because I'm an internalizer and I had stomach issues. And he said to me, he goes, well, Kelly, you just have to work through the stages. And I looked at him and I go, you did not just say that.
Well, so I feel like there's some credence. I mean, it's not linear. It's all over the place, right?
But it's not even those things.
It's not even those things.
It's expectations of what we're going to go through. No, that's not. Grief is a hot mess.
Nobody could say that for us. Nobody could tell us how.
Oh, okay. No. And so, So
what do you, if you tell us, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I taught him about the dual process model. I talked about continuing bonds theory. I talked about Warden's tasks of grief.
These are stop right there. Let's share some of these. I want to hear some of them. We probably don't have time for all of them.
So dual process, I think, is probably the best and the easiest. So it talks about loss-oriented and restoration-oriented. Loss-oriented is, as one of my clients calls it, in grief. So when you're really feeling it, you're expressing it, you're really struggling with the changes, you're wanting to avoid things, right? And then there's restoration oriented. That's when you're beginning to have to do new things without your loved one. Doesn't mean it's easy. It still could be a stressor, but it's getting out there with people, doing things again, living your life again. But it could be hard, right? For a widow having to do new things that they're not used to doing before it's going to be a stressor, right? But there's lines that go back and forth between those two because that's what grief looks like. It's a hot mess. 1 minute you can be crying your eyes out. The next minute you can be laughing hysterical and being like, am I losing my mind?
And what's it called again? Dual process.
Yep, dual process
and
model.
What I'm hearing is what I'm intuiting is you don't want to get stuck on either side. You don't want to get stuck in the grief and you don't want to ignore it. You want to go back and forth. So you're almost healing it is what I'm intuiting.
Exactly. And, the restoration oriented, my client that said in grief for loss oriented, she says restoration oriented is with grief. And I love that. We're living our life still with this grief. And as one of my little clients said to me, she said, it's like carrying around a backpack of rocks. And some days you just have to let some of the rocks out, but the backpack is always there.
Yeah, a backpack of rocks. I love it. So that's one. So dual. And you said two more. Can you share at least one more?
Yeah. So the second one is continuing bonds, which we'll kind of talk about in a minute when we get to talking more about the induced after death communication, but it's about how do you stay connected to your loved one? So I'm wearing a bracelet that my dad gave me. Sometimes I have earrings on that my mom gave me. Like, it's sometimes taking up a hobby that your loved one was into. I make Christmas chocolate from the molds that my mom used at this point 50, 60 years ago, it's talking to your loved one. It's writing letters to them. It's, this weekend I do a running program. It's called Healing Strides. The first hour is at a grief group. Second hour, we train for a 5K race. And at the end of the 7 weeks, we all run a 5K together, and we all wear a bib on the back of our shirts that says, every step I take in memory of. And we have a picture of our loved ones and their names. So that's like, how do you stay connected to them, right? Doing things like this. And so that's continuing bonds, which we'll go into more in a minute. But the third one is Warden's tasks of grief. And they're not, you go from one to the next. Right. They're always ongoing. It's to accept the reality of the loss. It's to lean into the pain of grief. It's to adjust to the environment where the deceased is missing. And the fourth one is to find an enduring connection with the deceased while embarking on a new life. Oh, so it really beautiful. Is about, how do you stay connected to them? Because yes, they may be physically gone, but we can still keep that connection.
Yeah. My dad is everywhere in my house. And it's just, I have his necklace. I have his hat, his Giants hat. I mean, the other day I put on his Penn State sweatshirt. But it's that bond that makes me feel, and, whenever I play oldies in the kitchen, like, I feel like he's always in the kitchen dancing with me, and we're singing, Dean Martin or whatever we're singing. I'm going to cry. But the connection, like, I feel it, and it feels so good. So what I'm hearing you say, I'm getting emotional. For me, it's about moving forward, because I have a new book coming out next month, and I had 2 people in my life lose their husbands unexpectedly around the same time. They both grieved, but one stayed stuck there for years. And I used to, I watched these 2 women, and the other one, even like you said, she could be a puddle on the floor one day, but she put on her lipstick and got dressed and went into the world. Exactly what you said, that dual process. Yep. The other one, I would visit her for tea, and after a while, I just stopped going to her house because she just stayed so stuck. So what I'm hearing, the tools you're sharing, am I correct in saying they're all to help you? You still feel it. You still, I'm crying right now thinking about my dad, but you keep going forward. Yep. Is that correct?
And that's it. It's not about moving on. It's about moving forward with love and grief. Okay. Right. And I think that's, for the people that stay stuck, sometimes they get stuck on what we talk about in my grief framework that my friend Karen and I have developed, is the roadblocks. And so the roadblocks are the anger, the guilt, the fears, right? We're so good at beating ourselves up. So it's so easy to get stuck in the coulda, woulda, shouldas. I know my sister feels like we should have done more for my dad. I do not have that.
Yeah. And my sister, it's so interesting. My sister remembers those last days in the hospital when he had a trach down his throat. I'm like, Dart, throw that away. Do not even let that memory in your mind anymore. Like, you need to remember the good times. And that's how I process it. And because if I remember those horrible last moments, it just,
well, and that's it, Michele. That's what happens, is our brains are like Velcro to the bad. Yeah. So we get stuck on that ending. We get stuck on that death scene. And that's what people focus on. And that's one of the roadblocks, right? So that's what I do. One of the first things I do with my grieving clients is we work through that death scene, whether they were there or not. Because if they weren't there, they've still created an image of what they think happened. They've created that image, and they're playing it over and over again. And I didn't want that for my dad. I didn't want that with my dad. My dad's last few minutes were not peaceful. I wish they were. They were not. Either. And so I'm
sorry, I'm cutting you off because
you're fine.
I'm sorry. I'm being a bad podcast host. But my dad was not violent. It was not pretty. And I said, he was a fighter in life. He's a fighter in death. I had to wrap my brain around it. I had to rewrite it. Mm-hmm. Yep. So before I'm getting so excited, and that's why I keep tripping on my words here. I was stepping on your words. I apologize, because I have little time and lots to talk to you about. But I want to talk about this induced after death communication, because I feel like, let's go to the other side where we could kind of feel that connection.
So it's a therapeutic technique. It's clinically based. It's researched. It continues to be researched. So some really good research that just came out recently about it as well. It's been around since the 90s, probably. Alan Botkin developed it. He was working at the VA, and he just kind of accidentally developed it. It's based off of, but not definitely not EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's kind of the gold standard of trauma treatment. It's been around since the 90s, but this technique is based on using the eye movements, the bilateral eye movements, but it does not follow traditional EMDR. So it really isn't. I don't even think we should even be really saying it's EMDR because it's not.
Okay.
So what happens is it's a 2-session protocol. First day is a 90-minute session. You ask the client a couple of questions just to evoke some feelings, have them start talking about their loved one. And then you begin with the eye movements. You do that processing, feeling the sadness, not managing it, because that's what we do as a society as a whole, right? We manage our grief. We push it down, push it down. So we stay with that sadness. We lean into it. We push through it using the eye movements, and they start processing and processing. And then you ask, what's the next piece of sadness? And you process that. You keep processing. And usually day 1, you're still kind of processing that sadness. They go home. They come back the very next day. Day 2, it's another round. You start with the rest of the sadness. And at this point, usually it's not as intense as day 1. You see a shift. And the sadness peaks and they start to come down. And the theory is that the sadness is preventing the after-death communication from occurring.
Yes.
So once they process that sadness, they're more open to having that ADC, right? And ADCs are naturally occurring.
What's an ADC?
After-death communication.
Okay, I didn't know the acronym.
Yeah. Yeah. So we all have them. Like about 75% of society has admitted to having an ADC.
75%.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty low, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's seeing the cardinal. People could say that's an ADC. It's hearing, like you mentioned before we got on, your mom, feeling your dad, seeing your dad, right? These are ADCs, dreams. They mostly occur in dreams. And, so once they have that sadness, they get to a peaceful feeling and they feel calm. And then we kind of say, what would you want to say to your loved one? And then we stay with the peaceful feeling. And then the research is that in therapy offices, it's about 75% of people will also have an after-death communication. I would say that's accurate. I do grief retreats and we're at 100% on each retreat for having ADCs. And I think because we're doing other things in combination with it to support them. But it's unbelievable.
But let me back you up because this is what I want people to hear. First of all, I love what you said about we're not managing the emotion, we're processing it. Tears have stress hormones in them. When you cry, you're cleansing. It's like salt water, like the ocean. It's cleansing you. It's helping you. So I love what you're saying about feeling all those feels and processing them. And I have this saying, I don't even know where I got it from. I always say, I can only cry for so long and eventually you stop. But like that feels good. It's a good feeling to cry. The other thing you said was you can't reach them when you're sad because they're at this level of joy or exuberance or lightness or freedom, whatever they are. And if we're in grief, we're too far away to communicate with them. And I love that.
I think our frequencies aren't matched. They're at a way higher frequency, right?
Yes.
And grief is such a low frequency. So we have to bring our frequency up. So then that way they can really come through to us.
Yeah. My dad, when he stayed at my house, so when he got older, he couldn't lay in the bed. His back bothered him. So we got him a recliner in the bedroom, the guest room. So every morning I meditate in his recliner and, we talk and I kind of say, okay, I know you're here, but it's for me. I'm the one that has to get to where you are because I know you're not coming down to where I am. Mm-hmm. So, some days I feel him, some days I don't. But everyone listening, you said so many good things. I could talk to you forever. 75% have had after death communication. This is so much more common than we think. And I feel like for years I was a closet spiritual person because I live in a corporate world, but I believe so many metaphysical, spiritual things that I don't even believe it. I know them. I just know. And the more I've opened up over the years and talked to people, everyone, oh yeah, that happened to me. Or my dog came to me in a dream, like everybody. Mm-hmm. So it's really about us talking about death. First of all, that it's part of our reality. Also, talking about death, talking about, communication. And the other thing I heard an author say once, which just made me feel good, like she said, humans created illness so we could leave. because our souls are meant to come back and leave, you know, come and go away, but you don't just turn to your spouse one night and go, oh, it's my time to go back. Mm-hmm. So humans create it. And whether that just, for whatever reason, that like soothes my heart. So if you know, and people say to me, how do you believe this, Michele? I'm like, well, if it's true, I'm better off. And if it's not true, I'm still better off.
Yep.
So what's some final tips or thoughts? What's your brain clicking on right now? I could see you just had a thought.
I was just thinking, you know, like you can't work at hospice and you can't be around people that are dying and not believe something happens. And I know I have a spiritual bias. I'm well aware of that. You know, I meet my clients where they're at. Not all my clients believe that something happens. And obviously I meet them where they're at. My goal is not to change them. But there is some research, even with IADCs, people who don't believe anything happens, still having ADCs from it. Yeah. So, you know, like you can't, I don't know. There's so many stories that I've heard over the years. Like it's hard to believe that nothing happens.
And so you're we got on before the podcast and just started chatting, and energy between us is like high. We're just both very energetic, happy people, or grounded people. I don't know what the word you want to use, but I'm not a hospice person. I'm not dealing with grief. So my first book was called Happiness is a Habit. And it was it was based in positive psychology and the habits of people mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. So doing the work you do, how do you stay, you know, emotionally, you know, well, and how, you know, let me just start with you. What are your habits for staying happy or staying grounded?
I'm always holding crystals.
I love it.
You know, I do a lot of breath work. I found breath work in 2019, and it is my go-to probably tool that I use. It's a very active breath work. I've had after-death communications multiple times during ADs or during breath work. I've fallen off the path of my meditation, but I used to be very good at that. I need to get back to that. But, you know, I have a puppy that I absolutely adore and love cuddling with him. I have a running program, so I like being outside and moving my body. I have, you know, and we moved to an office a couple of years ago because in private practice, you're usually by yourself. There's 8 of us here. We have a medium in here, you know, so we have lunch together. We like to laugh. You know, I think what makes me probably different than some other grief counselors, not everybody, but a lot, is it's not just sad in here. Yeah. Like we laugh in our sessions. One of a client told me once, he said, you know, I love coming to your grief groups because it's a both. Like, we're sad, but we always laugh. And he's like, you've got such a good balance. And I think that's what we need. We need a balance.
And that's what I'm thinking as you're speaking. I'm like, you're giving us a new face for grief. The work you're doing is so important. I'm getting chills. I could cry again because it's so important it's everything, right? It's like we have this grave, like let's all wear black and, you know, and be sad and be heavy. But you know, now I know more and more it's a celebration of life, right? It's a celebration of a life well lived. So I love this work you're doing. It is doing so much for the world. What's a final words of wisdom that you could share with us, or anything you want to leave people with?
I always just like to say that, you know, if you are struggling with grief, there are supports out there. There are resources out there. You don't have to do this alone. Even if your friends and family suck at grief, doesn't mean you have to do it alone. There are resources. You can check out my new podcast, The Grief Ladies, A Guide to What Comes Next. My friend Karen and I both have a very similar personality and view on grief and loss. We do laugh a lot on the podcast, so it isn't so heavy, but we give you actionable steps and tools to be able to help yourself. So check that out. Check out a grief group. You know, if you go to grief counseling because you're dealing with some of those roadblocks and you're stuck, you know, there are people out there, and ask questions. It's okay to ask a therapist, like, what experience do they have with grief and loss? Because not all therapists are grief informed. So find one that is. Make sure they've had experience working with clients with your type of loss, especially if it's a suicide or an overdose. You know, there is support out there and there's resources. You don't have to navigate this alone.
You are a gem. I've never been so happy talking about grief in my life because you are putting a new face on it, and I'm just so thrilled to be in your orbit right now. Tell me where people can find you. Are you on LinkedIn, Instagram? Do you want, where would people follow you?
Yeah, all of the above. You could check out Center for Informed Grief on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. My name, Kelly Daugherty. The Grief Ladies podcast is on all major platforms and YouTube. And there's a bunch of me everywhere. So
okay. And I always put everything in the show notes. I also send an email to all my subscribers, which will have all your contact information in. Kelly, this has been a joy. And I did not know what I was getting into going in. So I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to the grief lady today. So I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised. This is wonderful. I definitely will have you back on. Thank you everyone for being here today for today's episode of Write Your Outcome. Make it a great day. It is Michele Phillips saying you always have more power than you think. That's a wrap for today's episode of Write Your Outcome with me, Michele Phillips. If something sparked in you and you enjoyed this podcast, please don't forget to rate, review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's keep these ripples going and make it a great